अस्सलामु अलैकुम। मैं ज़मीर अहमद अंसारी और आप देख रहे हैं जेड न्यूज़ फॉर यू। अर्ज यह है कि आपने अपने चैनल जेड न्यूज़ फॉर यू को अभी तक सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया है तो सब्सक्राइब करें और साथ में दिए हुए बेल आइकन को भी दबाएं, जिससे हमारी आने वाली सभी वीडियोस के नोटिफिकेशन सबसे पहले आपको मिल सकें।
Thank you. All right. Well, I know people are coming back from the tea, but maybe I'll get started because I want to make sure to present a little bit about the project, but also leave some time for questions afterwards. So I want to start first by saying that I'm really just very honored and grateful to be here. I'm thankful to our amazing friends and partners at the Global Food Banking Network, but also to TTC, to the India Food Banking Partners, who have all been amazing partners of us here and have been incredible in terms of their hospitality, welcoming us here, both on this trip and on our prior trip when we came to do research for this project. And I've just been really impressed not only with the hospitality, but also with the incredible innovation that we've seen and creativity, and also the businesses that we have met with and talked to that, we've heard already, and I'll talk about, there's no real incentive to donate right now in India. So all the businesses that are choosing to donate food, the caterers, the retailers, the food suppliers, it's all just incredible individuals who are trying to do the right thing. And it was very moving to see that in my experience here. So before I talk a little more about this project, I also want to give a thank you to two of my teammates who are here, Regan Pleakenpole and Caroline Dashke, who are up there in the front. You can direct all of your questions to them after the session, and they'll be able to answer. And then, as you heard, I direct a program that really works all across the food system. So what we're really looking at is how does law either serve to stand as a barrier to making the food system healthier, more sustainable, or how can law present opportunities and incentives to make the food system better? And I'm going to talk today about our Global Food Donation Policy Atlas. So what's the issue? We've heard this already today, so I don't need to go over it again, but we have a big issue. We're wasting 1.3 billion tons of food, a third of our supply of food, and at the same time, 820 million people or more are suffering from hunger. From my perspective, of course, I'm coming to this as a lawyer, as a law professor. What is the issue? The issue is that in a lot of cases, law is standing in the way of actually directing more of that food to people in need. And that's because food is really regulated at all levels. It's regulated in agriculture, in the fields. Food is regulated in restaurants, in food service, in institutions. And sometimes those regulations can create confusion about what you're allowed to donate. They can create barriers, and I'll talk about some of those barriers that make it more costly to direct that food to people in need. Or law can create a lack of incentive. So if we want everyone to change what they're doing, but the policies aren't there to make that incentive possible, then law is standing in the way of us having, this more sustainable, more successful future. And so what we really have found is that there's a critical solution, which is to adopt clear and comprehensive laws that make donating or directing food, recovering that food, making sure that food doesn't go into a landfill, making that the easy thing to do, making that the financially incentivized thing to do, and ensuring that it's possible for everyone. So what we're doing is in a Global Food Donation Policy Atlas project, we are partnered globally with Global Food Banking Network and with support from Walmart Foundation to start this project. And then we are working with partners in 24 countries, including partners here in India, the different food banking partners that are sponsoring the event today, to do a few things. The first is to analyze the laws related to food donation and food waste in those countries, to recommend policy changes for those countries that are based on interviews with food bankers, businesses, and government to identify what are the top opportunities for change, to create a platform for global engagement, and we do that through both our website, where we share all of this information, and then through conferences and webinars. In particular, we've hosted webinars that are primarily focused on government officials from different countries meeting together virtually and sharing policies that are working across countries to try to help facilitate change. And then lastly, by delivering technical assistance on implementation in some of the countries where we work. And one of our priority countries has been to do this in India. So we're really glad to have this amazing partnership here. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I wanted to show just that, we have amazing resources. Harvard Law School has one of the best law libraries in the world, but we're not just sitting at Harvard doing all of this research. We have a methodology that includes, for every country where we work, asking partners in country to work with us, visiting them, meeting with country partners to make sure that we're understanding the laws correctly and that we're interpreting correctly how they apply. And then in each country as well, we've had legal experts review our materials before we publish them, just to make sure that everything we say is correct and is accurate, and the partners are all comfortable with that. And that really starts from the in-country food banking partners that commit to work with us. So this is really kind of what we've produced globally. You can see two snapshots here from our website. On the right side, you can see a map, and I'll show you on the different policy areas how this map looks. So what we've done is, in the 24 countries where we work, there are 7 policies that we look at, and for each one of them, you can see countries color-coded based on how strong their policy is on each of those areas. And then we also have a library on our website with a legal guide, policy recommendations, and an executive summary in both English and the native language for every country where we've worked so far. So this is what we found. The most interesting thing was that we found that actually, even though in different countries the challenges are different, the context is different, the food banking models are different, what we found in the first year of visiting countries was that when we interviewed partners, the same issues came up in every single country. And these are the issues that we've now looked at in India, in every country where we've worked. So these issues are the food safety laws. Are they clear? Sometimes if the food safety laws don't mention donation, then people are always wondering, are we even allowed to donate, or are we going to get in trouble with our food safety authority? Date labeling, which I'll talk more about. So that is like the expiry date or the best before date. It often causes a lot of waste because there's confusion about what that actually means and whether food is still safe to eat. So it's causing waste at the household level, and is that food safe to donate? So it's causing waste at the retail level. Liability protection. I'll talk more about this. We heard already just earlier from Ms. Vandana on the last panel about this issue, and from other panelists have already raised this issue. We look at both tax incentives and tax barriers. So this has been interesting. We heard today about the fact that there's no tax incentives here. In some countries where we've worked, there's actually a barrier in the tax that companies can claim a credit when they throw food away on the value-added tax or the goods and service tax where they've paid. If they throw it away, they can claim a credit, but when they donate that food, they can't claim a credit. So that can be a barrier. Actually, it's more costly to donate than to throw away. Are there any requirements to donate or penalties on waste? Any government grants or incentives? And lastly, is there kind of a framework food waste law and policy? So we look at these 7 issues in every country, plus in every country, through our partners, if we learn of other important policies, we study those too. So of course, in India, we've heard about the CSR requirement, and we learned about that, and we talk about that as well in our guide. And then here's just a picture of the India legal guide and India recommendations, and a photo from our last trip here that we took in an after-school program in Mumbai with some of the children there. We had a really lovely day. So let me talk through some of the areas a little. I'm going to try not to go into so much detail. You can access everything later, and I want to leave time for questions. But I'm going to talk about a few areas that have been rose to the top of our research in India, either because they're a good model or because they're an opportunity. So one of these is on food safety. And I mentioned before, in a number of countries where there's not good guidance on food safety, businesses are left wondering all the time, am I allowed to donate? Am I allowed to donate this food versus that food? Am I going to one day get in trouble with the food safety inspectors for the food I'm donating? And actually, it's been amazing. You can see here our map. Green means a strong policy. In India, we've been kind of going around and, bringing FSSAI to come speak on webinars and really highlighting that this is a model here in India. So here's a photo of our visit with FSSAI on that same trip in 2020. And we said, food safety in India is a strong policy. And that's because it's one of the only countries where the Food Safety Agency has really seen this as part of their mission to ensure not only that food is distributed safely, but also that businesses know that they're encouraged to donate and that, the Food Safety Agency isn't trying to come out and get you if you're donating food. So in particular, FSSAI passed the regulations for the recovery and distribution of surplus food, which you heard from Ms. Preeti in the earlier panel, and then also established the India Food Sharing Alliance and the Save Food, Share Food Network. And it's really a model globally that we've used. Even in the U.S., we had a webinar, we had FSSAI speaking, and we invited our U.S. FDA representative to come listen so they could learn, why can't you do more of what India is doing? Make this part of your priority too, because if you can't answer questions about food safety for donation, then no one's going to be able to answer them. So this has been an incredible, model that we're raising up coming out of India. Another area that we heard about a couple times earlier today was liability protection. And so, again, here you can see our map. The issue here is that businesses, when they're donating food, they're not making money for donating it. And they're very worried about taking on any extra risk. And in particular, if they're giving that food that's gone through all of their safety steps, they're giving it over to an NGO, they feel worried. What if something goes wrong and it comes back and becomes a liability for them? So you can see here, for us, a strong policy here has been countries that have adopted a policy that offers protection for businesses and also for the NGOs that are, as long as food is safe, it meets all the safety laws and requirements and is handled in good faith. That means, everyone was doing their best to handle it safely. These are countries that offer that protection. And then the ones that you can see in yellow we said were moderate policy. In a few of those, it's because this protection is offered by every state in the country, but not on the national level. So it's still comprehensive, but there's small differences from state to state. And as those of you out here who are working, from the corporate sector, if you have a different rule in every state, it becomes very difficult to, just do your business on a national level. So, Australia, Canada are examples where there's protection everywhere, but it's a little bit different between different states. But it also can be a model to start from the state level. Even in the U.S., our national Good Samaritan law was modeled after a state level law originally in California that did this at the state level. So as you've heard, in India, there's no policy on Good Samaritan liability protection for food donations. And I want to raise this one up in particular because we've already heard about it today, and from our research here and working with different partners, this has come up a lot. And actually, we've been running a survey the past year with partners from CII, Feeding India, India Food Banking Network, and Food Future Foundation. And we haven't published the survey results yet, but the preliminary research we just got back shows that asked about liability protection, of the 40 companies that responded, 87% said that they believe there should be liability protection if food is safe and is handled with good faith. And 94% of the respondents said that if there were protection in India, they would either begin to donate if they're not donating, or they would donate more than they're donating right now. So I think that's good evidence that this is something on the minds of a lot of businesses and can be useful. So I'm not going to go into so much detail here. I just want to, for each of these, put up a spotlight of a country that's doing something. Argentina is a great example. Brazil, which we're about to publish the research in Brazil later this year. Also now they offer protection for businesses if they, are handling food, they're following the safety rules, and they donate that food in good faith, trying to help people in need. So those are great examples that could be a model. And this is also, again, not to go into so much detail, I wanted to show this because we looked at across the countries where we're working. Since 2016, 8 countries have passed or updated their liability protection. So in the U.S., even this year, we updated our liability protection to expand it and offer even more protection for food donations. So it's an area that's heating up. There's a lot of global movement on this. There's a good opportunity to learn from some of these models. Date labeling. So this is the map we have. I think, one of the challenges with the labels on food is that everyone's a little concerned about this. No one wants to eat something that's going to make them sick or donate something that will make somebody else sick. But the science shows us that actually it's nearly impossible to put a label on food that's really related to safety. So therefore, when companies are putting a label on food, it's really about quality and taste and freshness. But the problem is that in many countries, and this is true in India as well, if that date, if you're not able to donate and use that food after that date, for a lot of food that actually is causing a waste. So I think what we've seen from a global level, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization has put out model standards that say the best practice is to have one label for quality and a different label for safety. And actually that certain foods will only have the quality label because there's really no scientific way to link that with safety. So we can then tell people with these foods that have this quality label, you always can, smell and taste them. And if there's something, you'll be able to taste if they spoil, but you're not going to get sick. You're not going to get a foodborne illness from them. And we said in India, there's what we call a limited policy because all foods now, packaged foods, are required to have an expiry date. But when we've talked with companies, they've said that often that date is really just about freshness and quality, and they're putting an expiry date, and they believe that that's leading to a loss of shelf life for some food that could be eaten or could be donated after that date. And a model here, and again, I'm not going to go into so much detail. We have lots of information. I'm happy to answer questions. The United Kingdom, which does a really nice job of both having separate labels on different foods. So shelf-stable foods, packaged foods, they all have a quality label only. Perishable foods, high-risk foods have the safety label only. And they've done like national education campaigns, and they've made it very clear that food can be donated after it has a quality date. So that's a good example. And again, here in just our countries, 7 countries since 2014 have updated their date labeling laws to have a dual label standard and to allow donation after the quality date. So tax incentives, we heard about this. Right now there's not really an incentive in India to donate food. But there's a growing number of countries that have some incentive for businesses when they donate food. And I think a big reason to do this is that, as we've already heard today, donating food isn't free. There's a cost. You have to have separate space to store that food. You either have to pay to transport it or someone has to pay. Maybe it's the food bankers that are doing that. But having, some incentive for the business to donate can also help them take some of that cost and share that partnership a little bit more with the NGOs that are handling the food. So our map here, we show strong policies are ones where there's a incentive to donate. It covers the value of the food. And then most countries have a cap so that they can have a better accounting, like they'll know how much money they're on the hook for. But we've said a strong policy is one that has at least 10% of the income can be offset by that incentive. This is not news. We've heard a couple times here today in India, there's no tax incentive for donating food right now. And then also, as we heard, there's this, amazing CSR program, and it's supporting a lot of food banking from the financial and equipment side, but the food itself isn't able to be counted as part of that CSR. So one spotlight here I put up is Colombia, which has, they say donors of food can claim a tax credit up to 25% of the value of that food. But there's not, they can claim as much food as they donate. So again, a lot of countries play with a cap on the value or on the income in terms of making sure that, there's some incentive for businesses to donate, but it's not equal to the value that you get for selling the food, because of course we want everyone to sell food that's able to be sold. This is just to support the cost of donating surplus. And then I'm going to talk really quick about one other area, which is what we are calling food waste deterrence policies. it's sort of a category of policies that a number of countries are starting to implement. And actually we're seeing a lot of this at the state level. Like in the US now, 9 states have implemented a policy like this. And what it means is either there's a requirement that you donate surplus food or a penalty on excess wastage of food. So example, the state of Massachusetts where I live, businesses can't send to disposal more than a half a ton of food per week. So right now it's bigger businesses. It doesn't apply to the smaller businesses, but it's led to not only increase in donation, a 22% increase in food donated. It actually led to job creation, 500 jobs created in 2 years, and $175 million in revenue to the state in 2 years, just by requiring that food not be thrown away. So these jobs are being created in food banking and food donation and food rescue, composting, animal feed. We're treating food as a resource instead of treating it as trash, and that's created jobs and money coming into the state from tax revenue. So this map shows really right now the strong state we have on there is Ecuador, which has been a partner that we've worked with a little. They just passed a law that they're working to implement. And then some of the ones that are in yellow is ones where there's, like I mentioned in the U.S., there's a number of states. This is percolating up from the state level. So in India, there is good work on segregating, bio waste from other waste, but there's not any work on requiring that be donated or showing that goes to the best level of the hierarchy in terms of going to people and animals before most of it's going to compost and anaerobic digestion. And one example I'll put on here is the country Peru, where they passed a law requiring donation from food warehouses and food retail of food that's safe and edible. So this category is, I would say, like the cutting edge. They're the most difficult to pass and enforce, but we've seen in 8 of the countries where we're working have passed a policy like this in the past few years. So growing number of policies there. Design of these is all very different. And it could also be a really good opportunity to start with state level or city level government to implement these and see what might work. But the idea is really setting a new default that food shouldn't be wasted. So just to summarize some of the opportunities that we talked about for India, I think one of the first ones, we've heard about this a lot of times already today, is offering liability protection for companies. I think, even though it's very unlikely that there would be a lawsuit against the company that donated food, so no one should be nervous. But as this starts to become more of a global norm, I think global companies are expecting this kind of protection. And again, all that food should be safe. They should have to follow all the rules. Nothing should be donated that's not high quality and not safe, but giving that protection. The second is having a dual date labeling scheme that is recommended by the FAO Codex Alimentarius under their model guidelines on packaged food. That way you can make it really clear there are certain foods where the date can never be a safety indicator. The science just doesn't make it about safety for those foods. And then you can let people know that those foods are still safe after the date. Offering tax incentives or really any incentives for business to donate. There's a lot of opportunities here to think about what the incentives could be. But right now, as I said, it's amazing seeing the interest, but there's not a lot of incentive to do that. And then I wouldn't recommend right now going right to some sort of food waste deterrence policy that I mentioned, but a starting point could be offering more funding to build on a more national level and scale the amazing food banking and food recovery work that we've heard about that's happening throughout different places in the country, but making sure that there's really nationally coverage of those opportunities. And then last slide is just we have so much information and resources, so I can answer many questions, but just to say, in addition to the resources we have about different country laws, we also have policy briefs on each of the policy areas we've worked on. So we have, a policy brief just on date labeling policy. What are the best practices? What should you know? We have one on tax incentives. What are the best practices? What should you know? We have now one on food waste deterrence policies. And then we've held some webinars and are about to pick up again doing those. And they're primarily for government officials across countries to get to speak with each other and share their learnings, their best practices. What are they trying to do? What are they working on? So I just want to thank again our partners, my colleagues who are here, our partners at Global Food Banking Network, the India Food Banking Partners, and TTC, and thank you all for your hospitality and for your amazing work that's inspiring me to keep doing this. I'm happy to take questions.
Sure. Yeah, if you want to ask Emily any question, please raise hand. Yes, sir.
It's a masterful exposition. We got a new dimension and new tangents to this issue. But let me say outrightly two things. A, in India there is a traditionally 1,000-year-old proverb which says दान की दैया के दांत नहीं देखे जाते. That's a Hindi proverb. Let me translate. That means whatever you donate as a cow, you cannot see her teeth, whether she has a teeth or not. So short point is, whatever you donate, it cannot attract any liability in principle. That's the philosophy according to my understanding. And carrying a step further, for example, in India, there are large number of roadside vendors who sell very cheap food. There is no liability. When there is no liability when you buy the food, how can, we are not come to that stage. I am not opposing what you are saying, but in Indian context, that perhaps has not attracted the attention of the policy maker. So how you sell your idea on this?
That's a great question. First of all, thank you for the proverb. I love, learning about the kind of, the way that this ties to the cultural. And I would say we've heard the same thing, that there's probably no liability. No one, I think there's not really a risk. One thing that struck me when we were doing this research was that we saw a lot more donation from Indian companies, and I think some of the global companies are less likely to donate because they don't understand that in the same way. Like, they're coming in saying, how can we trust these local NGOs that they're going to handle the food safely? So I think you're right that there's a great tradition of donating food, of this, like feeding your neighbors, supporting people, and I don't think there's a high risk. But we're just sort of sharing what we're hearing from companies, saying, how do we know? How can we be sure? So I don't know, how do you think we can raise up this issue and, make it a priority to do something?
Okay, let's take the next question from here.
Hi, I'm Sangeeta Robinson. I lead sustainability for the largest cinema chain in India. And I'm very inspired to, start donating food. Thank you also for making the distinction between best quality label and the safety label. However, have you come across a similar kind of industry, a cinema chain in the West where food donation has happened successfully? And if you could share some of your findings there.
It's a great question. Thank you. I'm so, I'm glad to hear that you're inspired. I have to say, we've worked with so many food businesses, but I don't think we've worked with a cinema chain. So you could be the first. I would love to learn more about the challenges. And I think, again, in all the businesses we've worked with, like, so much of where we've gotten the policy knowledge from started from working with individual food bank, food recovery organizations and individual businesses that come to us with legal questions. We help answer them. And then when we start hearing, everyone has this similar question, then it starts to seem like a policy solution can be more useful than us just answering a lot of different questions. So I'd be curious, to talk with you in the break and hear more what the challenges are from your perspective, and see if we can help answer any of them together.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Professor, the way you have mentioned about so many laws in different countries, is there any deterrence or any punishment to who violates the food law? In India, some restaurants, if you leave food, then you may be punished extra, you have to pay extra. In similarly, in some marriage party or a public place, person who leaves food unused, they can be punished also. Do you have law like this?
So you're asking if there's laws like punishing restaurants or food businesses for wasting the food. Yeah. So that's what I was talking, these food waste deterrence policies, that's what they're structured as. So, there are a couple different ways that they work, but in a number of them now, there's actually like a penalty if you're wasting food. That's the Peru law is structured like that. If a food retail or food warehouse has surplus food that they destroy instead of donating it, they can be penalized for doing that. Another example I'll give is actually Chile, which has a tax penalty if you, typically if you throw food away, you can claim a tax credit for that wasted inventory. But they've now said you can only claim that tax credit back if you can show that the food you destroyed was not edible. So there's a growing number of countries that are saying that, and I think they're very, they're difficult. It's like the carrot versus the stick. So that's the stick. But there are more and more countries that are saying, we're going to use the stick because there's no reason that we shouldn't, as a society, be able to find a better use for this food. Good.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We request you to come to the center of the stage so that we can have Dr. Ambika come over and present Professor Emily with a token of gratitude. Amazing research, one must say, and beautiful color coding. So easy to understand the atlas from the different laws that concerns the food. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now we come to the last technical session of day one. This is on key role of women in enhancing food and nutrition security. And to help us understand, look at the entire issue of food security from the gender lens, may I invite the moderator.
Hi, my name is Disha, and thank you for the wonderful insights. One thing that I heard a lot of ways to empower women through education, through financial incentives. What I couldn't grasp is how can you change or drive social behavior change within a household itself? How would you convince the family that this is for the woman, for the child in the house?
I think it's the mother who has to do it, isn't it? If your mother, when you become a mother then, now already, your question is how do you change the mindset which is at home, isn't it? So that, I think you need to do a lot of convincing to your parents, and you also have to show examples of other families where the mother or the father is encouraging the girl child and how she has come up in life. And I'm sure that will make them to think. That is one. The second thing is when you become mother, you need to make changes in your way of thinking and how you bring up your girl child. I'll give you an example. See, my mother was a doctor of her generation. Okay. During my generation, all the girls, they got married or either they were teachers or lecturers, etc. But in our house, it was very clear that I have 2 older brothers, but along with my brothers, I also need to study. I also need to do something in life. And my parents treated me equally. So I think that my whole thing starts with the parents at home. And when it came to division of properties, etc., I was given more than my brothers. That's what my mother thought. She said my daughter should get more than her brothers. And my brothers didn't object to it because that is what was her mindset. So they also thought, and now their kids, my kids, they all give respect to women, and we give more importance to the girl child in our houses. So I think it is the woman who should bring about the change. You can't expect the man to think for you. If you are lucky, if the father or the husband thinks like that. But I think it should be the woman who should bring about the change.
Kanta, would you comment as well?
I will beg to differ here slightly. One is that many times mothers are not conditioned to think on these lines that ma'am is talking about. They are not as privileged in terms of the thinking and their learning. Number one. I also feel, and I've seen in my life, that mindset sometimes is highly overrated. Mindsets change like this. You see a film and things change. I always give an example of how Haryana promoted sports for women. 2010 Commonwealth Games, Geeta Phogat gets a medal. Next, what you see? 200 akhadas for women, and their fathers are taking the girls.
because it promised them jobs, it promised them fame, it promised them cash awards. So mindset changes because of many other external factors, not just a mother. It's not the responsibility because we are already burdening the mother with many more responsibilities that she's already taking care of. So that's number two. Thirdly, now as I was saying, times have changed and the speed at which mindsets will change would not have changed in previous times. Now with the technology, with the exposure, with everything else, 1994, I remember when the first batch of women came in army, there were few in number. Now today you see 1/3 of the women officers are going to be women. It's of army officers, sorry, not women. So 1/3 of the army officers are going to be women officers. Yeah, very soon. Because male officers are not coming with quality, as officer-like qualities, men are not coming. So I'm saying it changes with opportunities, it changes with financial rewards, it changes with exposure and also role modeling. That is happening across sectors now. So wait little more time, 10 years from now, we will talk about it.
What I have realized, I have a different thing to say here. Actually, because of the exposure children have, I can speak of the rural areas. The children, their expenses become more. They are studying, and unlike earlier, they're not discontinuing their studies. This actually creates a bit of financial issues at homes. So men want women to work. When women work, they see financial independence. And with that, they are very firm with what they want. They get confident. And you would not believe it. We are not going through the BRC audit, British Retail Consortium audit, could be the first for a social enterprise in rural India. There are certain restrictions, as in you can't wear a bindi, you cannot wear glass bangles. I was wondering, how could I convince this woman? And I'm so happy to see that they are convinced, and they are convinced back home that they cannot wear it due to certain reasons. With financial independence, women have made their voices heard.
That's true. Okay. One last question.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank you all for giving a wonderful speech on women and their role in food security. And my question is also related to role of women in food security. So we have multiple schemes to empower women and children, such as Poshan Abhiyan, Mid-Day Meal Scheme, and other things are there. As Ratna mentioned, there is disparities in implementing these schemes. So I would like to ask, how do we overcome these disparities, and how do we bring forth community and community women to bridge the gap in implementing these schemes? Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you. Reena, would you like to take that?
I think, like Ratna mentioned, and Ms. Rajappa also mentioned, that if we can bring about a policy change in terms of where the local sourcing is happening from the local areas, that is one area, with which you can start, and once it will get results, it will have a ripple effect and it can move on. That's what is coming to my mind as I think about it. You would be in a better position because you are from
You're talking about the government, isn't it? Are you talking about the government?
I'm talking about the government, civil society, NGO as a whole.
Yeah, see, what happens is in a government, it is very difficult when you talk about women empowerment or not, because there are a lot of male colleagues also working out there. So they have different mindsets. So there is a gender bias and it is difficult. That is why whenever government plans something, it doesn't reach its expectations, isn't it? So it's a very difficult question to answer. It depends on the local women and the local leadership. And let me just say the last point is, now in the Gram Panchayat, as you know, from the 73rd amendment or whatever, from 93 to 95 onwards, 1/3 of the Gram Panchayat leaders are women. So initially we had this Sarpanch Patis going behind the wives and trying to dictate terms and all. But over a period of time, the women have started taking decisions. And we have the Gram Panchayat Adhyakshas also who are women now. So there are several women leaders at the Gram Panchayat level who take a lot of decisions, and they all sit with women and they work together, and they bring up, and there's a lot of change which has come about. So that is one way where you get a lot of change, because women themselves are taking decisions, because the leadership is in their hands at the village level. It's there till the district level. But for MLAs and MPs, we have no reservation, so we have lesser number there. But till the district level, there are a lot of women who are Gram Panchayat presidents, secretaries, and members.
Ms. Kanta Singh, as she said, let women be counted, let women take decisions, let them be in leadership role. Very, very profound, all the statements that you've made. Thank you very much. We'd like to say thank you to Ms. Chaya Nanjappa Rajappa. So, social rural entrepreneur, and that's quite an ABWCI Connect. Thank you. We'd like to say thank you to Ms. Reena Soni. Thank you, Reena ji. I hope soon we have Shark Tank for rural women. We'd like to say thank you to Ms. A. Ratna Prabha. 42 years back, and now hope things continue to change for better. And finally, thank you to Lisa, the moderator. Thank you very much. So that was the last technical session of day one. Once again, a round of applause.